So, enough talk about targeted marketing. Let's delve more into this current. Targeted marketing is the only current in this deck, which sounds quite weird because with only 3 copies in your deck, it's not every single game that you actually get to see the targeted marketing at a reasonable time. And that happens. In those games, it really sucks because targeted marketing is so important. Nonetheless, most of the other currents are just not very good or cause influence, and influence is very tight in a deck that runs Scorched Earth and Traffic. So, targeted marketing, once it's out though, you are very happy. Firstly, it enables Newshound. It makes 3 of your eyes gain more teeth. More importantly, it allows you to ban cards, essentially. A lot of my wins on the day came down to the fact that runners didn't really know how to play against targeted marketing. They never knew whether it was correct to ignore the marketing altogether or to play around it to the best of their ability. And these misplays by them definitely cost them games. If you get a turn 1 targeted marketing, what do you target? It's actually a very simple question to answer. I actually had a list of cards, commonly targeted cards that I brought in separate sleeves to the store champ, and people laughed at me when I played them from my deck box. But it is psychologically quite scary because people then realize, wow, this guy is really prepared. He brought an account siphon even though he's playing noise, just so that he can place it on the table with his targeted marketing. And yeah, that psychological factor actually probably helped quite a bit. So back to the question, what do you target? Against anyone who's running a green ID, you target SMC because it's so good, because SMC allows them to get clawed out at instant speed, allows them to get through your remote scoring server without having to face check the ice. They simply plop down at their SMC and bring out the correct breaker to steal your Astro. That is unacceptable. So against any green deck, just name SMC. Against any blue deck, you name account siphon. There's no question about that. Don't even ask why. It's pretty obvious. If you're suspecting that your Anarch opponent is running account siphon, such as Siphon Max, you name account siphon as well. For noise, of course you name Wildside if they haven't played it yet. Noise is so much more reliant on Wildside than any other Anarch because their dual win condition, which is using Faust to break using Faust to break subroutines with cards, and milling you by getting free draws from Wildside, is how they win the game. So denying them their Wildside is quite a huge deal. If you are forcing them to click for cards for the entirety of their game, you are more or less halfway to victory, because their noise mill suddenly becomes a lot slower, which means that you are much less likely to lose on noise mill. Finally, for all other Anarchs, simply name Faust, because as I mentioned earlier, that is more or less the only breaker that competitive Anarchs run nowadays. So by naming Faust, you put them at a very, very horrible conundrum. Once you slot an Astro into a gear check remote, say Quandary into Newshound, they basically have 2 choices. They install their Faust and give you mid-season's money to steal the Astro, or they don't contest the remote and you Astro train to victory. This is why targeted marketing is very well positioned in the current meta. Because when 90% of decks out there run this 2-card combo that seems most broken, targeted marketing allows you to capitalize on their one-trick pony. It's not like in the old days where Shaper, like Prepaid Kate, was around. You can't really target Dog or Sai or Mimic. That's a very bad choice, because if you target any of those breakers, they'll simply get their Atman out instead. They can play around it. But in Anarch decks where their only breaker for 4 strength or lower ice is Faust, naming Faust basically guarantees that you'll get targeted marketing, because they have to install Faust sooner or later, otherwise they can't get into your servers at all. So targeted marketing is the hard counter to Faust based decks if they're not running any alternative breakers, and that is a very big deal. This is why New Angelosaur is very well positioned. This is why on the same day there were 2 other store champs in the region that featured a lot of Sol domination. There was one other store champ that where Sol deck won, and in another store champ of the top 8 there were 3 Sol decks. A lot of people suddenly realize at the same time that targeted marketing is insane against false wild side, and with very good reason. Oh, still wondering why targeted marketing is good against account siphon? Well, it's pretty obvious. You gain 10, I gain 10. The big upside to this is that you can never deny me down to 0 credits with account siphon. I mean, you still come out ahead because you still are siphoning me for 5 credits, so I'm actually only gaining 5 while you're gaining 10. But, firstly, I'm not broke. I can still res my remote eyes, I can still res my R&D eyes. More importantly, you better clear the tags, otherwise you're getting scorched. Ice placement is still very important. Despite me saying that ice is weak now, ice is mostly redundant now, it is still very important to place ice correctly. I can't stress how important this is. This is game breaking or game making, depending on how you play it. First and foremost, you should always prioritize ice on HQ and your scoring remote over R&D. I know this sounds insane in a meta where medium dominates the field because anarchs are everywhere, but think about it this way. Most noise decks only run 1 medium. Blueberry Wizard runs only 2 mediums. What are the chances they see it in their opening hand of 5 cards? Not that high. Even if they do, you have the ambushes in deck against that. Cyber decks, Archangel. R&D is not very important. If anything, you want them to hit the Palooza on R&D. You want them to see the psychographics on R&D to allow them into a false sense of security, making them think that you are a mid-season psycho deck instead of a kill deck. You are both. They don't know that. So you do kind of you don't really mind them plucking early agendas of R&D as long as it's not too many. And usually R&D holds up. If R&D doesn't hold up, well, you probably lost the game either way because you're gonna get HQ flooded sooner or later. Besides that, ice positioning is also important in terms of which ice goes where. You don't really want resistor on your remote because it's porous. It's like placing Ela on your remote. You don't do that unless you're RP. Archangel is more of a central ice because putting it on your remote doesn't really do much unless it's an Archangel into an Enderun. That's a pretty decent server. But otherwise, you usually want an Archangel on the central. Sometimes you don't even want to install Archangel. Sometimes you want it in your hand so that if they run HQ, they'll get punished. Remote ice. Little Engine is almost certainly a remote ice because it is not very taxing if they run a proper decoder and you put it on your central. Wraparound is another one of those central ice because once they get the corroder out, it's only a 1 credit tax on your central. So you want it as a gear check on your remote instead. And most importantly, above everything, these are not hard and fast rules. You don't go around saying, hey, I watched this guy on YouTube and he says that this ice must be placed on this server, otherwise it's bad. That is not true. You have to adapt to every single game. There was one game against Criminal where Little Engine was the only ice in my opening hand. Well, it's going on HQ. Without targeted marketing, that is. Of course, it's going on HQ. Don't say, well, since it's a Little Engine, I'm going to place it on my remote, I'll put an Astro in my remote and hope that he doesn't siphon me first turn. That is stupid. Don't do that. These are not hard and fast rules. You must adapt to the situation. I'm just saying, in general, this is how the ice is most optimally placed. One very important trait of this deck is that at the end of the day, it is a combo deck, be it mid-season Psychographics or mid-season Scorched Earth Traffic Accident, or even if you're just playing for Astro Train. It is essentially a combo deck because you need to draw those cards to win. As such, you want to draw. You keep drawing. Drawing is what separates the pro from the average Joe. Even early game, don't click for 3 credits. You almost always want to draw. Jackson Howard in your opening hand is such a premium because a turn of install Jackson, double draw is one of the best turns you can take. This almost certainly draws you your mid-seasons, probably a couple of kill combo pieces while you're at it. At the same time, it rids you of your agendas if you are not comfortable with scoring them just yet. Or it draws you into your Astro script that you want to chain out next turn. So Jackson Howard is very, very important for this deck. I haven't talked about it, but it is an obvious 3-off in any deck, and in this deck, it is so good. Even against noise, you draw. Don't be afraid of decking yourself. This is not a deck that wants to go to the late game anyway. You want to draw because you want to win, not because you don't want to lose, if that makes any sense. Keep drawing, find your combo pieces, combo out to win. And again, this is why I emphasized early on that HQ ice is more important than R&D ice. Because you're drawing so often, you're probably going to be flooded with agendas in hand. You don't want your opponent to know that, and if they do, you don't want them to repeatedly come in to steal them. So this is a very important point. Finally, a bit on psychology. You have to play audaciously. This is not easy. I know that I can do this better myself. Sometimes it's you're too scared to make the right play, which is one that probably takes a bit more guts, which is one that doesn't seem right at first glance. For example, one of my games, I actually placed an Astro behind a little engine versus Kentenma, unres little engine. I knew full well that he's Kentenma and he's running lots of inside jobs, but I did so anyway because I was agenda flooded in hand. Out of necessity, not by choice. Turned out that was the right decision because he didn't actually have the inside job in hand. So I managed to score the Astro script and then chain out for the win. In another game, I played a naked Astro script versus Noise because, as I mentioned, I had that Toll Booth Jackson server, the very secure Jackson. I wasn't going to sack Jackson so that I could score my Astro. Not only did that mean that I would be vulnerable to Noise Mill again, it telegraphs that there's an agenda in there, he can probably get it. Instead, I play the Astro script naked when he's on 1 credit, when he doesn't want to check my remotes because he has no imp installed. That proved to be the game-winning play, because I was able to sneak out the Astro and chain into 2 more Astros later on in the game. So that was a very big play. In retrospect, it's very easy for the Noise player to say, I should have checked that remote. But in reality, it's psychologically so hard to bring yourself to check a remote when you don't have the credits to trash anything at all. And that's another thing. Even though, now that you look at my deck list, you realize that, hey, if he's installing a naked remote, chances are it's probably an agenda because he doesn't run all that many assets at all. And most of the assets that he runs are probably ones that he wants to guard anyway, like Jackson Howard. So anything that he installs naked is almost certainly an agenda. There are only 3 assets and 2 upgrades. As I said, this is how I'm countering to Wizard. By giving them very few things to trash, Wizard's ability is more or less nullified. So installing stuff naked seems like a wrong play when you're running so few assets and no traps at all. But if you think about it, they don't know what you're running. They don't know your deck composition. Abuse that to the fullest. And that's exactly what I did, and that's how I won my final game. So, I think I've rambled on long enough about this deck. You can go try it out yourself. Now that I've publicized it, it might not be that well positioned because that last point is no longer true. If people actually know what's in your soul deck, your chances of winning are drastically reduced. As a matter of fact, I played some games against James today where he tried out my soul deck, and me knowing exactly what was in my deck and what wasn't, I made some plays that a normal person would never have otherwise, that allowed me to easily win the game and make James's life very difficult. Make no mistake, the deck's surprise factor was one of the key attributes that contributed to its massive success. Still, it was a very effective deck, and to be fair, there are not that many crucial decisions that need to be made with this deck. You kind of get into autopilot mode after you land your mid-seasons or once you score your first Astro, because at that point it's more or less about trying to score more agendas or digging for your combo. But what makes this so fun is that targeted marketing leaves you with endless, boundless amount of choices. And making the right call can be very difficult. It could take you a few minutes to even think of what to call. In one game against a criminal, I had to actually target Passport instead of Account Siphon because I wanted to stop them from getting through my central code gates, and that turned out to be the right call. So there are lots of moves that you can make with targeted marketing that change the game. But overall, if you like the sense of psychologically overpowering your opponents, it's the essence of Netrunner. Play this deck. You get the psychological victory when they concede and succumb to temptation and give you your 10 credits off targeted marketing. You get the psychological victory when you sneak out an Astro on the board naked. You get a psychological victory when you taunt them and ask them, just install your wild side. Just give me the 10 credits. Let it be. Given. There are a lot of psychological plays you can make with this deck. and I can't list them all, but it's very satisfying to pull them all off. It's not just for the fun factor, mind you. It also potentially puts your opponent on tilt, leaving them more prone to errors themselves. Just like my Space Tricks deck, which was my SC winning deck last year, I won mostly because I was able to capitalize off my opponent's missteps. That is a huge factor of the way I play, and that is a pretty legit way to play. So if you think that court play is no longer fun anymore in the Faust David meta, well, think again. I think flatline decks are very well positioned today, and decks that rely on psychology like this can go very far if your opponent's not ready for it. Thanks for watching, happy net running. Goodbye.